rock and roll, and we'll have our teas as they come in.
Okay. Which way do I face? Is it that way?
Oh, you look at me, dude.
Look at you. All right,
Yeah.
I don't know. Decided
Get right to that.
Right there.
To that microphone.
Like that. Does that work?
Dude, you got a whole list of notes.
I have. But I was scribbling away just in case. Have we started?
We're on.
We're on. We're live and
Yeah,
kicking.
yeah. You always do this. Come super prepared. Not just prepared, but super prepared. What's on the list?
Oh, there's many things. It depends where we go. There's stuff about goals. There's stuff about how we look at things that we've done in Better Man with you and DX. There's stuff about the past and family and my parents and things like that. Because I've heard you talking. I've been listening to some of your other conversations.
Who have you listened to? Can you remember the names off the top of your head?
I made a point in listening to Duncan Neelan's first because I know Duncan quite well.
Duncan is rowing the Atlantic. He must be doing that. Is that? No, it's next year. No, it's this year, isn't it?
2024, I think.
Ah, it's only 24.
Yeah.
Okay, he's got time. Yeah,
Yeah.
he'll do that. He's got a good mindset.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, he's got a good mindset. We've got to touch on money.
Yes, got a
We've
little bit on
touch
that.
money.
Yeah.
It's funny because somebody came across to me the other day and was asking about if I've done anything relating mental health to the financial troubles that people are going through. Because I remember one guy saying to me, Ghost, he said, I remember whenever I've been like on my knees, like destroyed mentally, he's like, money's always been a part of the problem. Well, like, I don't know how I'm going to feed my kids. I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills. And I thought that's a really good point. It can add a lot of stress and anxiety and worry. And I think people are worrying, rightly so. I think we're all starting to get a bit like, you know, because I think from the chat we had some reassurances things were going to get better potentially at the end of this year.
Yes, potentially.
Potentially, yeah.
It depends where you're at. Should we do that first?
Let's go, man.
Yeah,
Let's just rock in, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, I see it as depending on where you are. So there's some people who say they're on benefits. They've got very little they can change or control, perhaps. Very fixed income or minimum wage type income and can't do much more. They might already be working flat out if they are working, you know, doing 12-hour days or something and trying to bring up a family maybe by themselves. And they're very restricted. So for them, they just have to wait for costs of things to come down. For those who are a little bit further progressed, they're in a situation where I think interest rates and inflation will fall. And I think there's an argument where they can fall by themselves. So if you've got the price of something and it's gone up from, just making up some numbers, from £1 to £1.50, that's 50% inflation from one year to the next, which is frightening. They've said food, and last month I think they said food inflation is 19%, which is frightening. But when that level is measured the following year, if it's still at £1.50, which is still blinking expensive and hurts the person who's on fixed income, but that £1.50 has already been baked in as a level, the following year, if it stays at £1.50, that's actually zero inflation, which is frightening. Yeah, when you look at it, it's just playing with numbers at the end of the day. But it means that inflation hasn't gone up and they may bring interest rates back down, which might help people who are on mortgages or car loans or credit cards or whatever. Will help those people. Still doesn't help the guy at the bottom on the fixed income who's paying rent and who can't do anything because that price is still £1.50 and it's still hurting them.
Got ya.
So we've got to hope and wait this out and dig it out. It's grinding it out. It really is grinding it out at the moment for a lot of people.
So when people say, when people say that they haven't had a pay increase, for example, for 3 years or whatever, but then inflation's rising, that's where the disparity lies, right? Where it's like the cost of living is now becoming more than what I earn, and what do I do?
Yeah.
Well, that can't be a good thing for us anyway as a country, because surely the government have to start giving money to those people that need it anyway. So surely it spills out in other areas.
Yeah, because then somebody else needs to help fund that.
Yes.
Yeah, and taxes and national insurance and stuff. But the government's playing a tough hand at the moment with saying, we're not going to pay the nurses more, we're not going to pay, people like that more money, saying that will bring down inflation. But I would call that out slightly by saying inflation will bring itself down because of what I said a moment ago, that the price can still stay high, but if it doesn't go any higher, it can still remain where it was. But the inflation would represent 0 the following year because it's an annualised figure. It's a year to a year later figure. So those things will wash out. If things go up again, then we're in double trouble.
I was at Birmingham Children's Hospital last week, and one of the ladies who was giving us the tour was telling us what some of the staff were being paid. As low as 13,000. Some of the staff there. They have I don't know if have you been to that hospital?
Yes, my son was there for a while. Yes.
It's old school, like it's in the centre of Birmingham. Like, from the outside, you're like, oh, but inside, like there's some proper special people in there. Like the kids are amazing, but the staff, like some of them are just mate, they're incredible. Like it really opens your eyes, it humbles you. But and I think there's this like playroom where some of the kids go sometimes to take their mind off some of the things that are happening, and they have like people that are dedicated nurses in there just to playing with the kids and looking after them. And it sounds like it's an amazing job, but it's hard, man.
Hard because some of those kids aren't coming home.
Well, that's it.
That's the hard.
A lot of the rooms are there to take their mind off the fact that they're either going in for a big op or that they're only going to live for another few months. So it's not like playful fun, it's almost a distraction. But yeah, they're getting like 13k.
That's rubbish.
Well, it's rubbish, one, because it's a tough job, and two, like 13k now, like especially like if you're got kids, well, even if you're on your own, I couldn't live on 13k.
Well, rent would be £800-900 a month now for a normal place, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think our coffees are here. Just one
Cool.
minute.
Yeah, it's caffeine time.
It is.
I need my caffeine.
Who's got the tea?
That's me, boring old me. Thank you, tea. Lovely.
Oat milk?
It will be without.
Americano with oat
Doesn't
milk.
matter. It's perfect. No, I'm fine.
Lovely.
It will be
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
very
Hardy.
much. Perfect.
Cheers. Thank
Thanks
you.
very much.
When the maths doesn't even make sense on paper, does it?
No. I presume you were there with Molly's because I was going to touch on charity later. Was that something to do with Molly Ollie's?
You know Rob Horsfall, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, he got an invite through his company, but we didn't know that Molly Ollie's actually have been working with them. So it was a bit of like, oh, amazing, because I was doing the Molly Ollie's challenge at the weekend. But I thought Birmingham, Warwick, they won't probably have. But yeah, they're very close. They work very closely together, which kind of like just reignited my fuel to keep doing that kind of work, the children's work. The kids are incredible, mate.
They are. It's one of those things where you've just seen where life comes back around. You do a little bit of something here and then suddenly it comes back around over there when you don't expect it. And we've done stuff with Molly's, you've done stuff with Molly's, other people I know have, and it all just gets connected back up, doesn't it?
I owe it to you, actually. It was you that made me aware of them. I keep forgetting this, so I really like Rachel, the girl who owns it, and we've just done 5k at the weekend at Nevis, so I'm thrilled. But I forgot that it was you that put me onto it.
That's all right.
So thanks for doing that. But there's sometimes, I don't know whether you fall victim to this, I kind of think my own problems are the centre of the world, and then I go and get humbled like big time. But it's weird, like I feel like I can handle the horrible stuff in the hospital. Maybe if I was there all the time, it would be different. But when I told a few people I was going, because we went to the ICU ward and we knew some of the kids weren't coming out, people were like, well, why would you want to go and do that? Like, because I was given a tour, that was it. And I don't know why, but I feel like I can contribute something quite useful to do with my life to help others. Yeah.
Well, our youngster, our little one, was in one of those hospitals for a long time in Canada when he was born. So he was born at 24 and a half weeks and £1 and 4 ounces.
That's tiny.
So yeah, probably less than that coffee weight. Yeah. Definitely less than that coffee weight. And it was mental. And he's come out of it, and he's at uni now, and we've gone through it and we've come out of it well. But it was a very, very difficult time. So his brother and sister were only 13 months old when he was born, because he was born so early. So we had twins who were 13 months old, and Jay's born, and their mum's taken them to see her parents in Toronto, just outside Toronto, where they're from, and just for a visit. Yeah, and to tell them that she's expecting another, and it's only just happened, and it's all a bit of a blur. It was a bit of a shock. We were just getting our heads around the fact that we were going to have 3 kids, in another 6 months' time, and he decided he was going to be born, and I get a phone call. I'm here, and it's like, you need to come over like now.
Oh, you were in Leamington,
yeah,
and you had to go to Canada.
Yeah,
wow.
Like the next morning, I remember ringing my brother, and I said, "Angela's had the baby," and he goes, "What do you mean she's had the baby?" I goes, "I've just had a phone call." He goes, "What do you want me to do?" I goes, "Get to the house now. I need you." He goes, "Well, what do you want me to do when you get there?" I said, "I don't know. Just come." Yeah. And he come over, and then he took me to the airport at like 4 in the morning to go over. And it was just mental. I remember being in a room. It was a room a bit like this, and there's like 2-3 specialists, and they're going, he's going to go through this, and this. He won't walk, won't talk, might not get through the week, might not count. He might not. He'll have cerebral palsy. He might go blind. He might go deaf. He might, have this, that, and the other. And have you ever had that thing where you float up in the room and you look down on yourself? I've never had that in anything else.
Only when I've been tripping.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, it was nothing one of them. And I look down, and I'm just hear this blah 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 blah, and then the doctor said the only thing that went in. He goes, "None of this will be going in at the moment." Because I've literally just got off a plane, 7-hour flight, and run straight to hospital. And I was thinking that's the only thing that was true. And this went on, so they stayed there for 1.25 years before they could come home, before they could fly home.
Is that how long they were in Canada?
Yeah. He was in hospital for about 9 months, I think, in all.
Wow.
Till he could come out.
They said some kids are in there for years. Like I kind of never even thought about it. They got a school in there. They got They got like churches. They got playgrounds. It's like they've just basically took this building that's not the best building in the world, but they've kind of made it as good as they can. But they were saying like the MRI machine is on the bottom floor. They operate on the top. It takes 2 hours to get them up and down.
No way.
Yeah, so they're not wasting, but it takes an extra 4 hours because of the position of the, and in my stupid head I'm like, well, can't you just move the MRI? Yeah, and they said no, it doesn't work. So they're having to like build new buildings to accommodate. It's just old school. It's just not really thought out that well. But do you know what Magnolia House is?
No, is it one of those? I think they had one similar. Is it where the parents can stay? Is it like a Ronald McDonald house they had where we were?
Yes, it is, but it's for right at the end of the child's life.
I see. Yeah,
so what they were saying was that when, so if they were having to deliver news that to the parents, like, oh, we're really sorry, your child's not going to make it, they were like doing it behind curtains in the middle of the ward. Or in the nurse office, and they said like on the wall, like they had the calendar sometimes of the staff Christmas party was on the wall. And it just said the environment was just I mean, it's not through the nurse's fault. So they built Magnolia House, which is right in next to the hospital, but it's non-clinical setting. So I think John Lewis kitted it out. Normal sofas. It's quite calming, very quiet. But it's where some of the kids can spend their last couple of days if they're too sick to go home, and it's where they can break the news, and the parents can stay there. And so that's a pretty special place too. So we're going to see whether we can just help them get a couple more bits to finish that off, because that's a pretty cool thing to do. It sounds really morbid, and it's very sad, but it's quite a beautiful building actually.
It's making the best of what it is, of the situation that those families are in, I guess.
I would not even imagine what it's like, bro. I don't know how people get through such turmoil, and I don't know how people do it. We're tough as fuck. Humans are so tough, but I don't know whether it's a life breaker. People get over it. Rachel did, but whether you have to then dedicate your life to the pain that you were caused. So I don't know if that's the only way you can get through it.
I remember a stat which was very sad, which was like, and I don't remember the percentage, but there was a massive percentage of families that fall apart afterwards, after going through what they went through, what we went through, that just can't stay together at the end.
Right,
it's
you mean
really
they
sad.
They break?
Yeah, the whole family breaks up. Yeah, the parents and
Do you think it would go one way or another? It either kind of brings you closer together, or
it does. But because we spent 1.25 years apart. I was going back every 6 weeks. Wow. But we were living 2 different lives. I was running a business here and looking after my elderly mum at the same time. And then
the Murphy's Law, they call it, you know, when just everything happens. So like your mum gets sick, your child gets sick, business hits some shit times.
Yeah.
It's like the rule.
No, that kept going. The lucky thing is that kept going, which made my life a little easier. That looked after itself. And I had a business partner at the time who took care of stuff while I had to go every 6 weeks. But my wife and I were living 2 different lives. You know, she's there at the hospital every single day. She's got the twins at home being looked after by mum and dad, who are now a year and a half old, or you know, a couple of years old by then. And I've hardly seen me twins. I've hardly seen Jay. It's all over. We're all over the place, and it took ages to like kind of rebuild from there. And wherever we could, we'd get a chance to rebuild, you know, a little bit and spend a day together.
Well, was that tested then, the whole kind of family dynamic?
Yeah, totally, because we're in 2 different worlds.
What was the difference between how you and the wife handled it? Like, because they always say men handle trauma and worry and anxiety so differently to women. Were you able to show how kind of like scared you were, or did you have to put on the brave face, the business face, the keep things together face? You know, that mask that you have to wear. Yeah,
I mean, she was lucky she'd got her mum and dad there and her brothers and sisters, which was very good. You know, the whole family are there. She's one of 6 kids, so she's got 5 brothers and sisters there supporting her, and her parents, which was cool. So that kept it intact a lot there. But yeah, I think you're right. I became very, what have I got to do next?
Yeah, what have I got to do?
Yeah. What have I got to do? Yeah. What's in front? Just keep doing, keep going. My mates were brilliant as well. I've got really good friends, and they really were good. Yeah, they were brilliant, all of them. I remember some of my mates picking me up and saying, "Right, don't go out yet. My missus has made a load of food for you to put in the fridge before we go." You know, and stuff like that, little things like that. Do you need the shopping getting? Whatever, because I was looking after my mum, and everyone was brilliant. But then one of the things I had to do was I had to organise Jay's care for when he returned back to the UK. And literally when he flew back, they flew a nurse over there to fly back with him. They flew him back with oxygen on the plane. They had an ambulance from Heathrow back to home. Yeah, you know, it was still quite poorly. He came back here, and all the care I'd organised here, and bear in mind I've worked here all my life since I was 16 and done all the things you should do and paid me taxes. It all just went to poo. Like straight away. All the things that were meant to be here, his oxygen and this and that and his medicals and his care and his support, just went to snot. And after, I think it was about 3 months, I sent them back to Canada again. Because his care was that much better.
Wow. You know you can swear on here, don't you? You've said poo and snot.
Yeah. But I might put this on our work link, you see.
Do you want me to be on best behaviour then as well?
It's your call. I can't, yeah.
Okay.
You're Alex.
I'll say flip.
Flip. Oh, no.
Flipping.
Oh, tosh. It all just fell apart here. It was rubbish. It really was. For everything I thought I'd done right, you know, and I'd been in touch with social services and all those people, the million of medical people I had to deal with. So I had to send them back, and that was heartbreaking.
Who do you think's responsible for that? Because like when you go and visit these places, you're like in full admiration of the nurses. You're like, they're fucking working so hard and they're so caring. So I'm like, well, you know, because we are quite critical of the NHS, right? So I'm like, well, who do we start pointing the finger at when things like that? It wasn't them.
It really wasn't to do with the doctors and nurses, or when we used to go to Birmingham Children's Hospital or Warwick Hospital or his specialists or his paediatricians. It was more just the the people who organised it all. I'd say it was the organisation side of it, so a level above that.
Right.
Yeah. The actual people who do the doing, the people that mattered, it wasn't to do with them at all.
Can you imagine having financial stress on top of all this? Can you imagine that? Having letters through your door at the time going, look, you know, you got to pay your mortgage, and if you can't. Yeah. Can you imagine that? That's what I'm saying about sometimes is at the core of when things do fall apart. Yeah. It's just like additional shit. And if you've got to worry about that as well. Because I didn't think about this. Rachel told me this at Molly Hollis. So sometimes the money that we raise just helps feed the families.
Yes.
Because if you can't feed the family and then you've got to look after your child who's sick, it's like, oh my...
and you're taking time off. You're not able to go to work. You can't focus on. I know I couldn't. I found it hard to focus at work, of course. You know, because there's a million other things you're thinking about. But I've considered myself lucky in that respect, and that's one of the things that maybe later we'll talk about. Is I suppose because of my job. So we run a financial services practice, and I've done this since 1989. I'm very safety minded, yeah, and I luckily because of times like that, and maybe when COVID came and we had to move all the business home and everyone home overnight, and all that happened, and now with the cost of living that everyone's going through, we've not been under any stress or pressure, and I sometimes, and I've had this conversation, I know, with you guys in the meetings. I sometimes think, am I a bit less ambitious? I could go out and buy another this, that, or the other, or move house or whatever. Whereas I'm just like, I'm more comfortable being bulletproof and not having that stress you just mentioned on top of everything else that life will throw at you. Which is a nice. I
think lockdown and COVID kind of like hit that home to a few people. So I think sometimes we live right on the edge of our income.
A lot of people do.
Yeah, so we stretch to get that car lease that we can just afford, and if everything goes to plan, I'll be fine. But whenever like some shit hits the fan, whenever some poo hits the fan, sorry, whenever poo hits the fan, it's like, I can't afford it now. No. So it's kind of like there needs to be, I guess, for me there always has anyway. I don't want to live right on the edge of my pay slip. It's too dangerous, man.
But a lot of people do that.
What was that stat that you rocked out on the Better Man training that was like basically people have got like 10 days worth or maybe a few weeks worth of savings in their account, or if they couldn't earn?
That's it. I've got it here.
I should have printed that off because that was a brilliant.
I checked it last night.
Right, okay, yeah.
So people perceive they have 60 days worth of income saved. So they think they'll be all right for 2 months. If they couldn't work, they'd have 2 months' money in the bank. And the actual is close to what you said. It's about 19 days. Well, it was recently. It probably might have gone down with cost of living. Which if you think you've got a family and you've got a mortgage and like you said, you've got a car and you've got bills, if you can't go 3 weeks beyond your pay slip, that is quite scary, isn't it?
It is. Do you think this is mismanaging of money by people that should know better, or is this just the fact that we've got ourselves into such a state as a country that people genuinely can't afford to be making savings, or is there a whole mixture of both going on?
Okay. I think this stat was done before we got into this cost of living crisis, which is frightening. Yeah. So there is a argument, which is that we got ourselves through COVID and the credit crunch by borrowing our way through it. So if you think Bank of England base rate was after credit crunch was 2008, if you remember. Okay.
Long time ago, yeah.
14 years, 15 years now, yeah. And interest rates were temporarily brought down to 0.5% and 0.25% back then. And then they came down to 0.1%. This is Bank of England base rate in COVID.
0.1%?
Yeah, was the base rate, yeah. And that was 14, so this temporary drop in interest rates lasted 14 years. That's not temporary, really, is it?
Not really, no.
That became the new norm, but it wasn't the norm. Where interest rates are today, if you look back like 30 years, is kind of the average. They've been as high as 15 and as low as 0.1.
15%.
Yeah, 1990 odd time.
That's crippling.
Yeah, and it was.
Yeah.
So the argument is that we borrowed our way through the credit crunch and COVID and recession, and that's been a way of keeping growth in the economy going by giving you cheap money so you can go and buy a car, buy a flat screen TV, buy stuff every year, yeah? Hence now, it's what you said, that we've borrowed so much, we've become so materialistic as a country or as a, well, maybe, Western world, got drunk on that cheap money. And now that costs have gone up and interest rates have gone up, and people are renegotiating their mortgages at £300-400 a month more than they were previously, they've taken that previous rate as their norm because it's been 14 years and kind of, habitually. I've had so many clients who've never, ever had a rate more than, 2%. now that's going back to norm, and then the cost of, bread, wheat, pasta, gas, lecky, petrol have all gone up together. And so you've got a perfect storm, haven't you? And that's why, back to the start of the conversation, you've got poor nurses on 13k a year, which barely pays your rent and your council tax and a little bit of a lecky, having to go to food banks. And that sucks.
I heard that 20k now is roughly what will get you through as an individual, by the way. This isn't talking kids. This is as an individual now, they reckon, to live a half-decent lifestyle, or a comfortable lifestyle. And by comfortable, I don't mean buying material things, I mean living, like good food. Existing.
Almost.
Yeah, in a half-decent kind of like living facility. So 13k is way beyond that, and for the work that they do. But I'm very cautious before I start saying, but we need to pay everyone more. Cause I think I'm quite aware that like we can't just start paying everyone more. Like, where does the money come from? So this is why, like, I'm not sure whether I agree with all the strikes, because I'm like, well, I don't think that's the solution. I get it, I understand it, but I'm like, we just can't go, right, okay, let's strike, let's pay these, let's pay that group, let's pay that group. Because I'm like, well, does money work like that?
Well, yes and no, but if you think, you can argue about how much is, I suppose I think there's enough money out there, it's how it's spread.
Sure, yeah. But I don't think that's going to change, do you, by striking?
Okay, but there was another stat, and again, you'd have to Google it to find the exact number, but apparently you could pay all the nurses what they need to be paid for the same cost of about 3 miles of HS2. Which would you rather have?
Oh, damn fucking right. I know what I'd rather have. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, though. But do you think the striking will get the nurses closer to what they deserve, or do you just think they're going to make some noise for a bit, and then unfortunately the powers above will crack on and hope that they quieten down?
And I think there is an element of that. Have you ever had a situation? I see this sometime in life. Where you've got a complaint against a company because they've done something, they've let you down on a product or service, or it's been no good, and you've complained, and they just kind of drag it out so long that eventually 6 months later you've had to give up and move on.
Yeah, it's more stressful to continue the pursuit of the complaint than it is just to let something go.
Yeah. Even though you were bloody right.
Sure. It's most company strategies, I'd say.
Yeah, it is.
So they take weeks to get back, especially like energy companies now. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
and it works.
And is it that? Is it just grind them down? I mean, they're saying now, I'm sure I heard something that said they're now at the point where they have to negotiate next year's pay deal, although they haven't dealt with last year's, or maybe even the year before's, So it is that war of attrition. I do see your point there, but I do just think so much money is wasted. My cousin, he runs a really, really good business. He's like a fashion designer up in Manchester. He's got a factory. He does quite funky stuff. He had to close his factory in COVID, like everyone had to close their businesses, but he offered to make PPE. Yeah, and he offered to deliver stuff because he'd got vans and delivery drivers, and he'd got so much he could offer to help at the time when the country was in trouble, and he just wasn't allowed to do anything. And then he saw the contracts and how much they paid people for doing things and making things, and he'd offered to do them at a fraction of that price. And then he got offered a price to do something. Where they said, well, we've asked, 50 companies to do this and no one could do it at that price, so we've given it to my mate down the pub who's made 10 billion quid out of it. He said the price he was offered, he said, what do you want me to do for that price? And it was so little that he couldn't actually cut the material, let alone stitch it, put it together and deliver it for that price. Yeah, it was pennies. And then they said, oh, and by the way, in that price, you also have to buy the material. He was like, you can't even buy the material for that, let alone put it together and deliver it. And he just said it just felt so wrong to him, the way it was being done. And he wanted to do the job, keep his people in a job, to do some good, help people who needed it.
I got
So much money is wasted. And all right, you can get conspiracy theory a bit. I'm not a conspiracy theorist by any way.
Why not?
Why am I not?
Because some of them are true.
Yeah,
That's what does my nut in. You know when people
go
go, "Oh, I'm not a conspiracy theorist," I'm like, "Well, nor am I really." But it turns out that some of the biggest conspiracies are actually true.
Yeah, but I think I'm a bit worried about some of the conspiracy theories are also quite evil.
Give me an example.
I suppose if you could start with Trump and QAnon and raiding the Capitol building,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole world's not a million miles away from that at the moment. It feels like.
Well, you know, when I'm watching these crazy fucked up films that are like seem so out there, they always say that like truth is sometimes like scarier than the fiction that we see on TV. So I don't know whether I'm cynical, but I wouldn't put anything past anyone.
I'm with you on that at the moment.
Yeah, it doesn't mean I'm sitting there paranoid about what's going on in the world, but I don't, for example, with our own government, I don't necessarily think that our best interests are at heart, so therefore I believe there will be certain things that are done in an ethical way, in a conspiratorial way.
There was a thing I saw yesterday, and I don't know if it's true, I haven't checked it out, but it was something to do with, you know that phone alert we got the other day? Did you get it on yours?
Dude, that freaks me out. I'm like, firstly, like we're in the car driving back from Scotland. One of the guys didn't know it was going to happen, so he freaked out. I was like, what the hell is that? I'm like, how do they get access to our phones?
Mm-hmm.
I thought they couldn't do that. Or that's what this, so how do they get access to everybody's phone?
I don't know. I haven't looked
And
at
then the funniest thing was it said, in case of emergency, go on the government website. And I'm like, okay. So in case of a real emergency, I've got to get online on my phone. So I've got my phone on. As well as the other 8 billion people in the country trying to access this one website. Like, what does this mean? What was the point of this? This is not helpful. This is just creating fear.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Does that mean... Is that another way of kind of controlling us like lockdown was? The conspiracy theory, if you want to go conspiracy.
What's conspiratorial about lockdown? There's so much evidence out there that like masks and shit, they weren't that effective. They weren't. Especially like if you're going to be on a plane, you pull it down to eat and you have to put it back up. Things like that. It's just insane when you think about it. And again, we won't go too deep on that.
No, but it was a really good way at how you click your fingers and everyone stayed at home.
Yeah, and I don't believe
and
they
I
sat
believed,
there.
and I did do it, and I did want to be careful. I did want to care for others, and I did want to,
we were scared.
Spent everybody home to work, and we re-established our business overnight. And I towed the line very well. But I do get the point of the fact that they could click their fingers and we'd all stay at home. And
do you think the same do you think the same thing would happen again? Do you think we'd be so
I'm just wondering if that buzzer thing from the other day was the same. But the point I was going to go to was apparently, so that contract for doing that went to Fujitsu or something, who put it out to a company that allegedly Rishi Sunak's wife is an owner of or something.
Yeah, like you know what I mean? Theory
yeah, it does a bit, doesn't it? But and I don't know if that's right or wrong. You'll have to Google it again. But I don't. You're right, and I don't want to go down the plug hole of worrying about every little thing like that. If it's happened, it's happened. Somebody else will deal with it. I've got to look after my family and my clients and my kids and my friends. And that's more important. That's what I can impact day to day.
Sure.
And that's where we have to stay. We have to keep our feet on the ground because otherwise you go down a complete wormhole, won't you?
Yeah.
And you've got to focus on what you can do and what you can influence and what can happen. But back to the nurses. This is all back to the nurses again, or the equivalent of the teachers or whoever it might be. It feels like so much money is misappropriated that you could probably see everyone all right.
Definitely. And maybe that's like we've just said, you do what you can control. There's very little nurses can control about what goes in their bank account. It's like, this is what you're getting. If you don't, you haven't got a job. So maybe they feel like striking is the only way they can be heard. So this was a whole like theory of the better man. It's like, okay, We're not going to sit here and talk politics. We're not going to sit here and complain about the world.
Yeah, good idea.
Yeah, we're going to do what we can.
Yeah.
But I think there's a full circle here of like this is how I see it and how I would see long-term growth in something like the NHS. So if we've got more responsible and healthy adults, we're going to be less dependent on NHS. Yeah. So this won't go down well at all, but I'm going to say it anyway because I've said it before. So if you've got somebody who's 5 stone overweight, inactive, government benefits and so on, and they're young and healthy enough to be able to go walking around the block, get some fresh air, and control their type 2 diabetes, therefore not being a drain on the NHS through cost of medication and insulin and stuff. I'm like, surely we should be working with those people, educating them on how to get fit and healthy, and then saying after 6 months, we're not going to contribute towards your medication anymore because this is in your hands.
One of your guys did this, didn't he? One of your previous interviews. He got himself cured his own diabetes, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
I can't remember which interview it was.
Come to that mic for me. I know it's a bit weird, like leaning into it.
Which interview it was I was listening to, but one of the chaps he did it, didn't he?
Yeah. I mean, that means you have to go to try and work on each individual person, try and get them to take responsibility. But that's the only way I can see out of it, and it's the kind of the nucleus of what the Better Man is. It's saying, dude, like control what you can control.
On the flip of that, linked to that, I also do feel if somebody's been on benefits for a period of time, whatever that period of time might be, 6 months or whatever, that if there's projects they can work on in the community to keep getting paid, you should have to go out and, whether it's help old people, clean up a neighbourhood, take down graffiti.
That's interesting.
Whatever it might be, help in a hospital, you know what I mean? If people who've been institutionally on benefits for yonks, isn't there?
There is, and I'm wondering whether because of that, their drive and ambition and desire to do things in the world has diminished. So it's strange, isn't it? Because when I was at Birmingham's Children's Hospital, they kept dropping in names of companies that had given them money, right? That you wouldn't expect, like NHBC Banking, and companies that you kind of don't relate to doing good work. But the individuals that were contributing were wealthy people, but they were driven people. They were wealthy because they were driven, and then they were helping at the hospital because they were driven. So I'm like, there's a link there, isn't there? And I'm not saying this is the case in all, but usually if you've been on benefits for 10 years and let's just say your confidence is on the floor because maybe you've gone and tried to get some work and you can't, and now you feel like you've been out of the game for 10 years and you can't, those people aren't likely to go, but I can make a difference to my community, because probably inside their own world, inside their body, they probably don't feel worthy of much and don't feel like they're contributing much. I get what you're saying, and I love that idea, but maybe at a self-worth level, their world starts to shrink and they don't think about the bigger picture. And maybe you wouldn't if you were financially completely stressed too. Maybe that would consume your world.
Okay, but didn't they say last year, because we've got a reduced number of workers, that, okay, back to the start of the conversation, there's not enough food on the shelves. Food on the shelves is very expensive right now. But apparently there was farmers' produce that rotted in the fields last year because there weren't enough people to pick it. Well, these people could maybe go and pick that and maybe even get paid a few quid more than they would get paid for not doing anything on benefits.
Sure, but how many times have you heard people say, if I go to work, I've got to pay childcare, which means I don't actually get any money for working because the childcare consumes all of my income. And I'm like, do you know what? If I had a wife and she had the choice to stay at home and raise the kids and get the same money as go out and work, I'd say stay at home.
But then there has to be a difference between what you get for staying at home and what you do.
But there isn't.
I left school. Or
it's 200 quid.
I left school at 16. I went back to sixth form for like 2 weeks and just didn't know where I was going with it. I'd got like 8 O levels, done all right at school, but then just didn't know where I was going. And it was if you went on the dole, you got £16 a week.
The dole, I haven't heard it called that for a long time. That's what we used to call it, the dole. Do they still call it the dole, or is that going to offend somebody?
I don't know, that might be something else now. Yeah. And if you went on a YTS, which I went on, you got 25 quid a week. And you had to work and go to college a couple of days a week. But it was a stepping stone. And I got an apprenticeship from my YTS. Within a couple of months, they moved me into an apprenticeship.
Are you going to say we're going soft here? Is this what you're going to say?
I'm just saying. It was an incentive to. I could have sat at home for 16 quid a week and done nothing. Yeah, I watched daytime TV. But yeah, maybe we are going soft. Maybe there has to be. You have to. Okay, you're not. It's got to be stepping stones. I know there's a million things to consider. I'm not saying about all the answers, but I'm just saying in principle, it's got to be better to look up and try and get people off there.
Sure.
And then it's going to make the world a bit of a better place.
1,000%. But this is the whole argument of like, well, there isn't effort equality, so we're never going to have equal outcome. And I'm true to that. I think that's so true. I think some people give 100% and some people give hardly anything back. But the rewards are not shown in the same comparison. Does that make sense? So sometimes if you give 100%, you don't get rewarded as you would when you can do it virtually a 0% job. Stay at home, and you know this. You can play the system quite well if you know the system, can't you?
And there's a lot of people who are professional at it. Yeah,
there's people that have X amount of children because they know that it's actually going to be more cost effective to have 4 children than 3 children. I
remember seeing that. I think it was when we were in the middle of Jay's situation and seeing a thing, and it was this person. It was. You never know if it's true, but it was in the paper, and this was a few years back now. It must have been 10 years ago, and they had, like you said, a family and all this, and living on benefits, and it was like £40,000 a year, and flat screen TVs in every room, and like iPhones everywhere, and you're just thinking PlayStations, and you're just thinking, this isn't right.
How many kids they have? Can you remember?
I don't remember.
I can just see the picture in my head.
What I mean?
Yeah, do you know what I mean? The mum and dad there with about 20 kids behind them. Yeah, just annoying people because they're just having kids because they get paid to do it, kind of thing. But then again, if it's a legitimate thing, like, then they're kind of not doing anything wrong, you know.
But then it shouldn't be it should be that once you've done that for a year, okay, you've got to do something. But you can keep your benefits, but only provided you go and do X, Y, Z.
Okay, so do we then install a pretty, like, let's say, like, you remember Margaret Thatcher when she was about and everyone fucking so you either loved her or you hated her, right? Yeah. Like, do we get someone like that in again that's going to come in and rub a lot of people up the wrong way because they're going to go, actually, we're going to change how this country works. Like, we will reward the people that put in effort and we won't reward the people that don't. And by the way, if you're 5 stone overweight and you can make a difference to it, we're not going to fund you for your medication. Can you imagine the uproar?
What you're trying to say?
People would go frigging nuts, dude.
But what it is at the moment, whenever they reward people for doing well, it tends to be those who are right at the top of the pile. So they'll cut their taxes, they increase some pension allowances, they do the bankers stuff, the bankers bonuses and the tax reliefs they can get. But you need to reward people all the way through. So you need to reward the middle always gets squeezed from both ends. Yeah. So those in the middle ground tend to get squeezed from both ends, and they get hit from both sides, and it really hurts. Because I suppose a lot of the people in your group are kind of in that middle ground where they're doing all right.
Yeah, we're middle players, I'd say. For sure.
Yeah. And they get squeezed both ways, and it hurts because I talk to them. A lot of them are my clients. But you need to have something that would lift those who are not doing quite so well. Yeah. So as long as you're doing it in the right way, you don't have to do it in a callous way. The problem with the last budget and the problem with what Liz and Kwasi tried to do, remember 6-9 months ago when the economy went into chaos, is it wasn't thought through, it wasn't joined up, it wasn't reasoned, it wasn't costed, it wasn't explained, it wasn't done in a way that benefited everybody. You need to do something that's going to, help people, in those different silos. And it always feels like you said, they do something really drastic and really revolutionary, but it doesn't really help the guy or lady who's not doing quite so well. And that's where you need to start, and incentivize them and give them, a stepping stone so they can step up. It's, and it's going to take time and it's going to take a generation or whatever. It's not going to change like tomorrow, but you slowly lift those who aren't doing quite so well up, because that benefits everybody. Because then at the end of the day, they go out and they'll pay a bit of tax and they'll be able to spend a little bit of money and it will go back into the economy and it'll feed the next person. If nobody's got any money, nobody's here buying these coffees at 2-3 quid.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, it affects the person who had the job at Starbucks.
But do you do that by eating off the people at the top then? Do you say to them, right, do you know what, we've got to give back now and funnel this back down into the bottom of the pile so that we can start to strengthen out?
Or
because people are talking about 70% tax now.
Yeah.
Or even I heard 90% tax if you weren't over 1.5 mil.
Right.
Yeah, now, again, people will instantly go, yeah, but they've got 1.5 mil, so they're fine. But I'm like, I've seen some guys graft, like, and sacrifice everything to build businesses that aren't as rosy as what they look from the outside. You know, it's hard bloody work. So I'm like, do I think they're deserving of a 70% tax? I don't think so. Not when, like you say, how much per mile for the transport you were talking about?
Oh, it's for HS2. It was a massive amount of money. You know, when you think they chop down the trees and they dig up the countryside, and it was enough to pay the nurses. You know, apparently a couple of miles of that. And if it's not a couple of miles, it's the gist of the conversation.
Sure,
is what I'm trying to get at. Are we spending the money in the right way? Are we doing things in the right way? Could we do things better? I don't think you can take 90% off somebody. I don't care how much money they make, because then they've got no incentive to work, because they're keeping 10%.
That's what they were saying.
Then that's not really going to work, is it?
No,
because they're just going to go, well, what's the point? I might as well just stay at home.
Yeah. And that would be terrible, by the way. If big business owners started saying, I'm not working anymore, imagine what would happen.
That is a problem. Yeah, that is a problem. I can get that. But equally, you can't have people who are working 40 hours a week and having to go and get free food. There's a balancing out there somewhere, isn't there?
Sure.
And there's caring for both sides, because you need people to lead businesses, because that's what employs other people. And those people spend money in the economy, which they spend in shops and businesses and services that employ other people, which you need. But you need the people who haven't got quite so much to also be able to go out and pay some tax and NI and spend money in other people's businesses, because that's how everyone lives.
One of the lads on the way to Scotland raised an interesting point, because we were talking about this, and he said, it's strange though, because he said a lot of people complain that they've got no money, but no one really wants to like knuckle down and save hard these days. You know, no one's willing to give up their nice coffees like they used to be. And I was like, do you know what? That's a really good point. You know, when I think about my first house that I bought, well, my only house that you helped me get, I had to dig deep and save every penny. I had to work overtime. I had to do everything I could. And like now, I don't feel like I've got the right to complain about finance, because I've wasted so many over my years on fucking fancy clothes, nights out on booze, just, you know, the typical stuff that you could look at like as an educated man now, or an older man now, and look back and go, I wasted so much money when I was young that I don't feel the right to feel hard done by.
Okay.
Different to the person who might not be. But do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When I think there's a middle ground for a lot of guys like myself who actually need to look at themselves first and have a look at where they're pissing money down the drain.
Okay. I firmly believe that you should have your fun money. Yeah. That you should spend some money on your super dry jacket, you know, whereas you could have bought what's it called? Primark jacket, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? But you should be able to buy what you want to buy and be happy and comfortable, as long as you're balancing it out with saving as well. You should be able to have your coffee. You should be able to go and have a beer with your mates, go for a meal out now and then, because that's your treats. Yeah, that's stopping and smelling the roses a little bit. But save also. So we've had a thing with our kids since they were about 14, 15, right? We got to the point where we said, right, previously, whenever they wanted to go and do something, you know, we'd give them some money to go and do that thing. So it's time to teach them how to budget. So this is coming back to where you want to talk about finances a little bit and how people relate to money. So we said, right, like most parents do at that point, you say, right, you're going to have X amount per month, which is your money to go and do what you want with. And you start off with that, but don't come to us then. If you want to go to the cinema or you want to go and buy something, you know, you've got your allowance, you budget it, and you decide what you want to spend, what you want to save. Then the next thing we did a little after is we started to give them 2 allowances. So one allowance was that first allowance we talked about, yeah, to do what they wish with. The second one was like a family allowance, we called it. And so if they were going to go and pick up something from the shop, loaf of bread, some milk, whatever we needed, or if they were going to go and collect a takeaway as they got a little bit older, or if there was something that was something we would pay for the house, or we had to get something for the house, they could pay for that from the family allowance. So we were starting to teach them how to budget and save and have have a family responsibility as well as having their own personal responsibility. So from their personal, they would spend and save, and from the family one, they would spend on any family needs, or if we were away. And it's just starting to get them to run their own lives and a family life a little bit. And this was from about the age of 15, 16, they were doing this. 15 probably. And now when they show me, they're way ahead of me. They've got like, is it Monzo, something like that, bank?
I think it's Monzo,
yeah. They have all these different pots. My daughter was showing me. So this is my spending money. This is my saving money for my treats. This is my long-term saving money. This is my family expenses money. Yeah. And she has these 4 or 5 pots all in the one Monzo account. And it's brilliant. They're just so organised with it now. So when one day they have their own places, yeah, they buy their own houses and they move on, they're already used to that kind of budgeting.
I understand. How many households out of 100 do you think have that skill?
Mine's probably
given the fact, by the way, the stat of people, most households don't have 16 days worth of savings.
Yeah.
What that is a good example of education and good parenting. Hence, working on the individual. So, listen, you get your own shit sorted, right? So that you can affect the 4 walls that you live in and the people that live in them. Yeah. See, this isn't the government needs to come along and save me kind of attitude. And people will listen and go, yeah, but I haven't, I can't give my kids these funds. And I get it. But that is an education, so your kids hopefully will be much better off in life. I didn't have any idea what the fuck to do with money. I've only just learned what a rainy day fund is. You taught me it. When you said, Alex, if you don't work, how long can you exist for? I was like, what do you mean? What are you on about? I can work. I'm 33. What are you on about? No, Alex, if you break your leg or get ill or whatever, what are you going to do? You started teaching me about life insurance. I don't know what the hell that was. I'll still call you up every year and go, Ghost, what's this bloody money coming out of my bank every year, Alex? That's your life insurance. But things like that, it's an education, isn't it? Yeah. It's an education.
It is. And you can say, what if somebody wants to do this with their kids, it can literally be 20 quid could be the family fund that they give them each month. Yeah. It's money you were going to spend anyway on the family. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So if you've got 2 kids and you give them 20 quid each and they go and collect the 2 takeaways a month or go and buy the bread or the milk, yeah, it's just a little stepping stone. It doesn't have to be a lot. What we gave them wasn't tons. Yeah, it was only a little bit. But it's just teaching them that little bit of responsibility is what we were trying to do. And it seems to be working. But, if one person picks up that idea from today, then that's a win, isn't it? That's a win, isn't it?
It is. What advice or wisdom can you offer somebody who's going through a whole load of like emotional and mental turmoil? So let's say you have people listening to this who are just damn right worried. Because you mentioned the word hope or knowing that things will get better. Because I think that's important, isn't it? When you can't see a way out of your financial troubles, this is where I think like planning is a good idea, and just showing somebody that there is maybe a path out. It might not be in the next 6 months, but getting things in order, basically. Yeah. I'm interested to know how to do that, especially when you're somebody who's spending every penny that they earn on food and bills. So there's no money in the pot for me to save. It's a difficult one, but it's more the mindset around how do you come out of that scarcity, or is that just something that's going to be with us like now and forever because it's part of life?
If we're in the middle of it now, it is a tough gig. 2 things I would only say that you could start to do. One is do a budget planner, and I've got a blank one if anyone wants to message you, and I can forward it to you. We can send on to them. Yeah. Just your income and your expenditure. just so you can see where your money's going and you can see what's going on different things. If you've got, you can do that on a piece of paper, you can do it on anything, but just see what's coming in and out.
Which is a great idea, isn't it?
Yeah, see where you can nip and tuck it if you
we,
can.
If we were doing weight loss, for example, writing down what you eat is the first thing that you can do to raise awareness.
Yeah.
So when you mentioned that, a lot of the guys went and did that, and it's like you kind of notice where your money's going, and sometimes it's not always as clear cut as you think. You're like, oh shit, I'm spending $2.90 a day on a hot chocolate. Little things like that that's so small, but over a month it's like, okay,
adds up.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then the second one is run 2 bank accounts. I was teaching this to a client who's retiring actually the other day. So you remember this lady's 65 years old, single. So she's lived a life. She's got loads of life experience, more than you and I. But
she's got loads of money, guys. She's 65 and single, mate. I'm on the lookout. I need to be looked after. Times are getting hard.
And I'll ask her if she's available.
Cool.
Yeah. And I said to her, what I'd like you to do is set up 2 bank accounts. So she's got 1 bank account now. She's going to have like 3 pensions coming in. I said, set up 1 bank account that all your pensions go into. Your current account you've got today where all your bills go out of, top them up, and every month from your pension account move enough across to cover it. I put some extra in at the beginning, so you got a slush in there. You got she was going to put an extra month's money in there at the beginning because she had it. So you got 1 month's extra money in there, which is in case things go up or something unexpected goes out. But then every month move enough across to cover those expenses. What's left in your account your pensions have come into is yours to save and spend. She's like, yeah, that works. That's easy. So it's the same thing with anyone now who's trying to allocate their money. Run 2 accounts. Have one that whenever your money comes in every month, you move across enough to cover your direct debits, your gas, your electricity, your council tax, your rental, your mortgage, and any other necessities you've got like that, and the rest, what you can then spend in the month.
Okay, that makes sense. If you've got 100 quid spare each month, right, but you were in debt, would you save money right now, or would you pay off debt?
Debt's getting expensive. I mean, if you've got a 0% credit card, maybe you let that run towards the end of its time, as long as you're saving enough money on one side to clear it. But if you've got debt that's costing you interest, get it out of the way.
So get rid of the debt first.
Yeah, if it's what you class as unmanageable debt. And credit card debt, if you pay the minimum off on a credit card, it takes you it's about 15 years or something to clear the credit card. It's something ridiculous, and their rates are going to be back up at 19-odd%. I haven't checked, but there must be something like that again now. Okay,
so let's assume debt is cleared. Then it becomes saving money for times like this, like what we call a rainy day fund. When things don't go to plan or you're out of work, you might have 6 to 12 months worth of money that sits there in case you can't work.
Exactly. Yeah, having a rainy day fund for sure. And then when you've got that there, you've got good at saving. You're saving that 100 quid a month. Let's say that then becomes your Christmas fund or your holiday fund or your treats. Sure.
And then you move into the world of investment.
Yes. Yeah. The next level then, you've saved some in the building society. You've got your best interest rates you can there. You've got enough there, and then you can put some money away for 5 years' time and get a bit of a better return, and 10 years' time, or for your pension so you can retire. It was one of the other stats that I had written down. It was something like 55, 60, 70% of people don't know how they're ever going to retire.
Yeah, that's What age do you think people start really looking at retirement? Is it too late? 1 and 2, is it like a past 40 kind of age? Because it's very rare you get a 25-year-old, and I wish I was one of them. Because I think, honestly, I reckon I could retire by the age I'm 40. So in 2 years, if I'd have known what I know now when I was 18.
Yeah, because that early money you put in has the longest time to grow.
Sure.
The first £100 you put in at 18 is worth 100 times more than the one you put in when you're 50.
Don't say that, man.
Yeah, but the sooner the better. So starting now is better than starting next year.
Yeah, I know.
You can't turn the clock back. It is what it is.
I know, but isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Well, if you think about it, so let's say you work from 20 to 60. That's 40 years, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. In that 40 years, you've got to save enough to see you through your retirement. If you're going to live to 90 by the time that comes, that's 30 years you want to retire for.
Sure.
So in 40 years, you've got to save enough to keep you going for 30 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's whatever your balance is, you've got to do that. But I see lots of people who come to see us who they've got bits and pieces from 5 different employments, and they don't really know what it amounts to. They don't think it's much. But when I put it all together, and I always say to people, the first thing I say to them is, how much and when. So how much money do you want this to give you, and when do you want it to start giving you that money? So how much is enough? So it's back to that budget planner. What's your budget planner at retirement? So if you're goal setting, we talked about this I think before, when you're goal setting, we said do a budget planner today to see where you are today. Yeah, to get a recce of where you are. Good, bad or indifferent. Then if you've got a goal for 2 years, 3 years time that you want to be with yourself or your family in a certain position, do a budget planner for that. And then you know what you've got to step up to be there. And then do another one for when you plan to retire. So, if you've got a mortgage, it's hopefully paid off. Your kids are perhaps grown up. Where do you want to live? What lifestyle do you want at that point? And, how much would that cost in today's terms? Because you can only do it in today's terms.
Sure.
Don't worry about inflation. That's our job to worry about inflation for you. But do 2 or 3 budget planners, and that'll help you see. And then you can work it backwards. So if you did one now that said, right, I want to retire at this age, and I'll need this much money to do so, you can then work it backwards properly.
I think it's difficult to look that far ahead, especially if you've only got 16 days worth of funds to live on. So there's a saying that we have that for some people the future isn't real. So I talk about this with health, like it's only real when you have a heart attack. It's if you're 40 years of age now and you're out of shape, it's not that bad because you're not dying.
Kind of, so what?
Yeah, it's like, I'm 3 stone overweight, so what?
Yeah.
But when you're 60 and you're fucked and you can't move, then it's real. And I think money's the same. I asked this guy once, so I was like, can you give me some advice? He was like, yeah, never be old and broke.
Old and healthy and broke.
Yeah, I was like, that's pretty good advice, because he said, your retirement lifestyle and the enjoyment that you get from life when you're 60 plus will be dependent heavily on whether you can afford to go out and do the things you want to go out and do. It brings me back to that question of how much of a role does money play in happiness? Because the cliche saying is money doesn't make you happy, but it offers you freedom to go and do things, right? I know that I'd be happier with more money than less money.
Yeah.
That's a fact. I don't care what
Here's why you'd be more comfortable. It'd be one less thing to worry about. Yeah.
Yeah, the other argument is that once you pass 75k, I think it has less of an effect. Because once you have 75k or whatever, your bills are paid, you've got the food that you want, you've got the clothing that you need. Anything else is bonus material. So if you're somebody who's got 0 money, it's massively impactful. Where if you're earning 40k and you get to 55, it's pretty game changing for you at that stage, because it's like, we haven't got to stress anymore. But after that, after 75, they reckon it starts to have less of an impact. An extra 10 Gs, for example. 85 to 95, is your life that different?
Right, I see what you mean.
See what I mean?
Yeah, it's a percentage. It's a percentage difference. Yeah. But I've seen people, 120, 150k more, spending been back to that. You'd be lucky if they got 19 days.
Really?
50 grand on credit cards. More month than money. Just in the same situation, because, and this is back to that cheap money, environment that we talked about earlier, and the drug of cheap money and cheap borrowing. They just spent, £2,000 a month on a car, and they're just totally out of control. And they just, it's scary. Some people, they just will always spend more than they've got. They will always spend. Some people's mindset is they will always spend 10% more than they've got, regardless of what they've got. They will do that. And it's not good. It's not good. But
I think it works for a small percentage of very driven people because it keeps them in scarcity mode, like, and maybe it's keeping up the Joneses kind of thing, or what. And maybe, like, you know, social media has a role in us playing that.
Totally.
But, because you know, you can show off your new car quite well, and it looks good. And you know, if you have the Rolex on your right hand, it does look good. It looks good. Let's face it.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I was thinking of, that's what I was going to come back to, was with health and with wealth, if you like, put them together. Sometimes you need to do things now to avoid what you don't want to be at the end, which is what you were touching on.
Yes.
You know, one of the reasons I follow the exercise, even though, you know, we're not training in the gym together anymore because we haven't got the gym now, but it is because of what I don't want to be like. I remember bumping into somebody who was always very active, very fit, a few years older than me, probably 5-10 years older than me, but played hockey, went to the gym, but he partied a lot. And I bumped into him, and it was really sad to see him because he didn't look well, wasn't walking very well, he put a lot of weight on. And it broke my heart to see him like that. And so one of the reasons I try and do things right, for both reasons, are, you know, so you don't end up in a place at the end where you wouldn't really choose to be. The best.
Yeah, I understand that. Do you not think you've been blessed in a strange sense that you had the motorcycle accident, which kind of stripped you of your health, and since then you've been far healthier? So I'm like, I think you were fortunate that you were given like a little bit of a fucking prod. Say, yeah, this is what life's like when you haven't got your health. It sucks, right? Finance might be the same. You know, you often hear about people going broke, and kind of really like educates them on how not to fuck up your finances. So unfortunately, I think that's how humans learn. They learn the harder way possible. You know, you must see it all the time. Busy, stressed businessmen, and they drive themselves into the ground, and they hit rock bottom, and then they elevate themselves. But it's only because of rock bottom.
I think you're right. Don't they say a lot of them have had to have gone bust at some point?
Sure.
To have, whether that's an old wives' tale or not, I'm not sure. But
well, I did hear this really interesting story the other day about they took, I think it was the top 500 most successful business owners in the world or something, and they are all driven hugely by insecurity.
By security.
Insecurity.
Yeah.
So, you know, they were trying to work out, what's their common morning routines, and everyone's was so different. But they all had, there was 3 common denominators, I can't remember, but it was all based around insecurity and not feeling good enough. So they were constantly driven for more. And it's strange that it's the insecurity that often propels people to their level of success. And finance is the same too. You know, I'm so insecure that I'm going to earn loads of money to buy this flash car so that you think I'm a badass. Makes sense.
Yes. And that is, that's self-image, and there's a lot to talk about there, isn't there? And what
there is, there is.
It's what matters to you, isn't it? And it's what your drivers are. And like you said, it's the Instagram, whatever, Snapchat mentality where everything's photoshopped anyway and isn't really what they say it is. Didn't they say that lots of the gym instructors take a bunch of pictures and then
I told you this, There was one guy that I knew that took like hundreds of pictures in one day, but it looked as though there were different settings and stuff, and he spread them out over the year. So it looks like he's in phenomenal shape all the year round, when actually you'd get fat and then lean, fat and then lean, fat and then lean. I mean, I think we all contribute towards that game, you know, but like you said, I guess there's got to be so basic psychology says, you know, we reward good behavior. So I understand that people would want to reward themselves with nice things. Like I would, you know, if I'd worked my ass off on a business, made a load of money, I'd get a new car, no problem. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I wouldn't. But I think I don't think you should be driven to buy those things. I think they should be a product of your success, if that makes sense.
Yes, totally. You got to be true to yourself.
What does that mean?
Yeah, but that's your truth. It doesn't mean the same for two people.
Do you not think it's been harder nowadays to be truer to yourself than ever?
Yeah, totally.
1,000.
For the reasons we said a minute ago.
Sure.
Yeah.
And there's almost like the mental health industry is a pretty weird thing. So this came up on the last podcast about how we're encouraged to be ourselves, but when we are, we can get punished for it, like, because our true self isn't always it's not always our best self. Like, to be your true self, you've got to show the good and the not so good, and in today's world, like, you can't really do that. So this authentic self, so authenticity for me, true self, like, you have to have the ability to tell the truth, which doesn't always go down well, by the way. I think if you tell the truth, you lose a lot of friends, people, business. Number 2, you've got to stop being a people pleaser. If you want to be true to yourself, which makes sense. But you do those 2 things, you live a very different life, I think, than one if you fit in.
Yeah, totally. And I've started to break things down now. So you've got, everyone knows this, that they break it down. You've got your work self, your work time, where you focus on your work, and your home time and family time and all that sort of thing. But I called it me time, which is which is, and it doesn't matter what it is about me. It's I like going to watch football. I watch Coventry City. Yes, at the moment.
Wow, you're going Saturday?
I haven't got. No, I'm supposed to be away this weekend. I'm
out.
gutted. Yes, it's sold out completely. I went last Saturday. So that's me time. Yeah. Going to the gym is me time. Yeah, doing this is kind of me time.
Sure.
Yeah. My music or my motorbikes or whatever, that's me time. Us time is me and Anjana, my wife. And we'll go and do something. And it doesn't matter if we're having a conversation, a coffee, going away for the weekend, whatever it might be. Yeah. And then there's family time. And it's, again, whether it's a holiday, whether it's just a meal, whether it's just sitting with one of the kids and talking about random stuff. I've kind of set it up to not feel guilty if it's one of those, because it's not at the cost of the others. The others have their own space and time too. And then again with work. So, when I'm working, I'm damn well working. I work hard. They see it in the office. Yeah, I try and lead from the front. I get on with it. I'm stuck in there. I'm grafting. When it's gym time, I can focus on the gym. Yeah. And I sit there and I've been listening to your podcasts, actually, preparing for today. It's been cool. So it's not to feel guilty about having those times. Yeah, me and one of my best mates, the reason I'm not going to foot this weekend is one of my oldest best mates is supposed to be going away this weekend. And I'm not going to feel, it's not at the detriment of anybody else, because then I'll come back and I'll spend time with the family. So that's part of my authenticity, to be able to do my own things, but without trying to offend others.
What if all of a sudden that was to be a problem? So is following your true self continuing to do me time, or is this where acceptance of a relationship means you can't do the things you want to do all the time?
Right. Well, you can't do them all the time, because I allocate time to Anjana too and the kids too.
Have you always done this? So this isn't something new where you've just turned around and went, "Do you know what? I'm going off with the lads for the weekend," or is?
Maybe I've realised it.
Okay.
About a year when I was doing my planning last Christmas, is when I wrote down 2 things. One was me, us, family, and one was authenticity. And then everyone's been talking about authenticity this year. When you think of something and then I must have heard it in the back of my head somewhere on something. And I've been like, to heck with it. This is what I'm about. It's about being true to yourself. It's about what makes you happy. It's about doing the things you want to do, but they're not necessarily at the detriment of others. I mean, one of the other things I've got linked up with is Russ from your group. He's got a thing called Fight Club.
Yep.
Yeah, which is a charitable thing, it's like a a charity accountability group, and it's brilliant because it keeps your eye on the ball with that. So it's another discipline. Yeah, you could add it to the list. And I actually said to them the other day, we had our monthly meeting on Monday, and I said, you've got Frogger, who does a bucket load. I know he's retired now, but he does a bucket load of stuff. Yeah, more than anybody I know, I think. And I said, I don't feel like I'm doing enough because I've got a family and I've got a wife and I've got a business and I've got this and that. And then I listed all the things I was doing, but I said mine are more intermittent than his, which are disciplined every week, is 3-4 things. And they were like, no, that's still enough. I was almost like, I'm going to drop out the group because I don't think I'm doing enough. And I made a list of all the things they were, and there were several of them. And they were like, no, that's still fine. You're more than in. But you don't always recognise it. It took somebody else to say, well, you are doing enough. And it'd be nice. It's nice to get that feedback and that reassurance. So it'd be from the kids. Kids never say, no one ever says you've done more than enough, do they? No. It's very rare. We've actually. This is a business story, actually. This is a really strange. It's a difficult one to tell, actually. We helped a client who passed away, when she was really, really ill. We were just taking care of all of her stuff for her and for her family. And we just did it because we know how. So we've always said to clients, if we set up a protection plan for you, if ever you think you need to claim, come to us. We'll hold your hand through it. We won't charge you for it. We're not paid for the providers for doing it. We'll just do it because we know what to do. Yeah. And cause we're here. We'll take care of it. We got this. And so we did this for her. And unfortunately, she passed. I remember her saying to me, she said, what do I owe you for doing all of this? I said, nothing. And I said, oh, no, actually, you do. I said, just get blinking better. Yeah. And her mum came in and she said, in her will, I won't say the name, in her will, she's left £500 that she wants you to take your team out for dinner with, for all they did for her over the years. And I was just like, I was almost in tears. I'm choked up talking about it now. And it's all about going the extra mile, doing more. I always have this rule, which is in any situation or engagement, I try and give more than I receive, wherever I can. And that's back to the charity thing that we were talking about. That's where it came from. If everyone tried to do a bit of that, this is back to where we talked about people, not just taking benefits, but maybe, contributing a little bit. If everyone could just, give a little bit more, then we're going to get on, aren't we, as a society? Everyone's going to be better off. What goes around comes around as well, because that will mean that somebody else will do better and somebody else will help somebody else, and pay it forwards, they call it. And I know you do it with the coffees, don't you, in Starbucks? That's great. You should tell that story. If everyone could just give a little bit extra, we'd be all right.
But I think that's a good example of, you mentioned the whole, like, you had a bit of guilt about not doing enough. So that's that self-critical voice that I spoke about that drives you on to do the extra mile. But these things come back to you. That's what I'm saying about successful people. You'll have that nagging voice that says, Ghost, you can do more, you can do more. And because of that nagging voice, you do more. And because you do more, you get more back. Does that make sense? So there's a good example. You're very successful, you've helped a lot of people. And probably, it's because of that voice that says, no, you can do more than this. You can give more, Ghost. You can help more people. So it's kind of like your friend at the same time as a bit of a critic. Critics are good, like, as long as it's not, like, say, a cocktail of any self-hate in there. It's just like you trying to get the best out of me. You'd push and encourage me, just like I'd push and encourage you in the gym. I'm saying, actually, Ghost, that's not enough. Come on, man, let's do another set of chins. So it's that kind of encouraging voice, maybe rather than the critical one. So that's a good example. But the Starbucks thing's funny because yesterday they approached me and want me to do talks on mental health now. Because they kind of picked up that I was doing this and they've seen me in there for months and they've started following the podcast. And they were like, would you be interested in doing a talk now? And I was like, so it kind of, all these things, like, the universe is weird, dude. You can do things 10 years ago that's good and it bears fruit. And I don't think you should actively go and do things because you want return. Just go and
absolutely not.
Yeah,
No.
and I know you're into this.
Yeah.
And the good thing about the authentic, how I know you're on a good path, is you don't agree with what everyone says. So if we're in that room or someone does something or says something, you won't be scared to say, oh, I see it like this, or I view it differently. I don't think you can be an authentic version of yourself if you agree and nod and just go along with everything. And this is where it takes courage, by the way. Courage is the virtue of everything. If you haven't got a set of balls or the courage to say, actually, I don't think that's right, you're never going to be anywhere near to your true values. So you've got to have strength to be yourself, because people won't always like it, and you won't always be everyone's favourite.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, not everything will. But what I do like is not necessarily agreeing with people, but having a really good chat about that.
Oh, you mean a conversation? Do you remember what those were?
Yeah.
Back in the day, before everyone was getting really offended by everything.
Rather
like
than
this,
everyone being hating each other. There's so much divisive stuff going on, name calling, labelling, divide and rule. I feel like it is divide and rule. And I like having a meeting of minds where you can agree to disagree. Whereas a lot of things now are, well, if you don't agree, you can do one.
I come alive when I'm in an environment of decent people discussing things that they don't agree with.
Debating things
in a respectful way.
Yeah.
That's for me, that's where I come alive, because I know I'm going to learn too. If we agreed on every single thing, that would be such a dull conversation. I'd never learn anything.
No.
So I'm like, that's why I love being in that room with you, Mike, and the guys. I'm like, every time I pick up something. So you brought me onto this analogy, me, them, me, us, them. I kind of love that. And you're always learning, and you might not agree with everything, but it also takes bravery to change your mind too. I think to look back and go, actually, I'm gonna change my stance on this. Yeah. Some people are so stubborn.
It's also understanding why other people have got different hilltops and viewpoints.
Yeah, but if I attack your beliefs, you're more likely to defend them rather than change. So if I'm trying to change your beliefs, or at least allow you to be open to a new way of doing things, but if I attack you, you'll get defensive. So that isn't the way to have good. And this is what you see in the House of Commons and stuff like that. This is why we don't really solve much, because they're not solving problems in there. They're fucking shouting verbals across the room.
Yeah, it's awful.
I was trying to think this morning, does it remind me more of a school or a zoo, the House of Commons? And I'm like, it's embarrassing to watch a bunch of grown men who run the country acting like a bunch of fucking idiots.
Yes. Yeah, and it's just name calling. Half of it's just name calling, and it is school ground. Yeah. I
had a great guy called Ross Slighting, and he was shocked that I'd never voted. He was like, Alex, you've got to vote. And I was like, well, I don't have to. I don't moan about the government in charge. If I was moaning, then and I thought, well, maybe he's got a point, maybe I should look into it. And I did a few minutes of listening to these guys talking, and I was like, I'm out. Because this was Johnson, and who's the Labour guy in charge?
Starmer.
So apparently he's all right, but this is just what I hear. But Starmer was attacking Boris. Boris was attacking him. And I was like, lads, this is embarrassing. I'm not voting for any of you.
I'm struggling right now who I'd vote for next.
It's two parties, right?
Yeah.
It's not like you've got a selection of 5 decent people to pick from. And again, it's not parties. Sometimes it's policies. But you've got to like the individual leader at the front.
Yeah. You've got to think they've got integrity, and
Boris was a hard one to vote for, man. Like, are you going to vote Boris? And then it's like Corbyn before. I'm like, fucking hell.
I'm saying I'm struggling to find.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's what I mean.
I don't know. Yeah.
And you got to do your homework if you're going to vote. If you don't know anything, like I don't know anything about politics, so I'd have to do my homework. But the more homework I do, the more I realise we're fucked.
I really follow it, and I quite enjoy it.
Yeah.
But I still don't know who I could lend my vote to right now.
Yeah. And
at all.
We said this in the car on the way back. We had some of the guys who had always been Labour, some who had always been Conservative, and they were all saying, we're in the middle right now. We don't know what to do.
There is no middle. No. The problem is the middle evaporated. And that's the problem. Both have become so polarised and gone so far each way that there is no moderate sort of middle ground left.
Do you think that's because of the death of conversations and the art of solving problems? Because they attack, they become more polar. And like you say, it leaves this huge gap in the middle.
Void
For normal people.
For
to
the
vote.
moderate person.
Do you know what I mean? Because usually in the spiritual world, most things always come back to centre.
Yeah.
So it's neither left nor right. It's neither dark nor light. Everything's usually in the centre. And for me, politics is kind of the same. So there's kind of like, you know, it's not right wing or left wing. It's somewhere in that sweet spot. But I feel like, in what I can see, it just doesn't. What happened to the Lib Dems? Do you remember the Lib Dems? Back in the day, they used to be like flirting around third place, right?
Yeah.
Where are they just
after
done?
the coalition? Do you remember they had the coalition?
Is that when they teamed up?
Yeah, and
Hilarious.
they got whipped after that. They got battered. They got made the bad boys out of it, and then some of the Tories left to start another middle ground party. And that evaporated too. I think people want it to be divisive at the moment and want it to be extreme. And one's a reaction to the other, and then you get called woke if you care about anything, because it's another way of labelling people and hating them. And
explain to me what woke. I'm so out of touch. I hear the word woke all the time. What's woke?
I believe it means.
See, people are throwing language around.
Somebody,
like,
and I'd have to Google it properly,
dude.
but I believe it means somebody who. Well, it depends how you look at it. Okay, it's used as an insult. That's the first thing. It's used to label and tribalize people and hate them, and it's people who they're saying have just woken up and are suddenly caring about race or homophobia. Gay rights, the green issues, slavery, whatever, Black Lives Matter, whatever. And it's saying, people have just woken up and they're overreacting, and it's comparing it to like the 70s sitcom world where you could say what you wanted to say, and get away with it. And you've got the GB News and people like that who are quite. I watched it once. I occasionally watch it to see what they're saying.
What's that? GB News, Great Britain News.
Yeah, and they must have used the word about 20 times in about 2 minutes as a put down. Now, I think I'd firmly fall into the category of the person they would categorise that way. Yeah, okay, whether it's animal rights, whether it's human rights. I'm impressed by Russ in the group. I thought I was charitable, but he was all about human rights and stuff like that. He's brilliant.
Yeah, he's gone for it.
Yeah, he's really deep on that stuff. I admire him for that. And he did all the charitable stuff I think of. He's just like way ahead. Or it's it's all these things, and that's not a very good explanation at all. But it depends which way you are. But I'd probably have to wear a badge that says, I'm woke, hate me. Yeah. And I don't care. And that's back to what you said. Yeah. But I suppose that might be coming from a immigrant background and parents who went through loads of stuff. So I can't really be called woke because I've known this stuff since I was 4 or 5 years old and first went to school and got called things.
Yeah, maybe you don't know that much about it because you're busy leading your own life and building your own business.
And don't watch social media much.
Yeah. It's like,
don't look at social media at all. I'm on no social media. Yeah.
I believe that if you are triggered and offended by everything, it just means you haven't got your shit in order.
Yeah. If you've got to label people and slag them off for being this, that or the other, at the moment, we talked about people not working, but a lot of first-generation migrants, whichever place they come from, work really blinking hard. Yeah.
Immigration was another topic we talked about in the car.
Yes.
It is, yeah, because empathy and compassion comes into it. So it's difficult to do this, but if I was in somebody else's position who's living in a country that was just fucking terrible and I knew the UK was better and I had kids, I'd do everything I could in my power to get us over there so that they could have a good life. So I kind of understand that point, but I understand it from UK point too. And this is where debate and good conversation is worth, because I could learn about immigration because I don't have enough information to make a decision. They say there's two things when you make a decision. You need, number one, information. That's what you need. Not too much because you could keep digging.
Yeah.
But then the courage to make a decision, especially in life decisions. It's like often we know enough to make a decision, but how much is enough? And immigration's a bit like that for me. I don't have the details. I don't know the benefits and the pros and the cons of it. So it's kind of like, this is why I don't feel in a position to vote. One, I don't know what's happening with immigration, and two, I don't know the party's stance on immigration.
One of my friends was talking to me. So there's a Sikh temple out on Kenilworth Road, and opposite there was that hotel which they used for refugees for a while. It's like a Ramada hotel or something.
Yeah, I've done the same in Stratford. Yeah.
And some of the people in there were Indian, Sikh, and so they were going over to the temple over the road. And they'd come from, I think, they were Sikh from Afghanistan or something like that. I can't remember exactly. But they'd gone over there and they were talking to my friend's family, and they'd left businesses where they'd got, loads of employees and a good life, and, people who worked for them and people who cleaned their houses, and had to run and leave everything to get out. And everyone's going, they're just coming over here for an easy life. Well, they had a bloody good life, a better life than we've got. But it all got took away. I mean, my mum was born in what became Pakistan. She was born in a town called Lahore. So we're Hindu Indian. And when partition came, they had to leave their house and move across the border to the Indian side. And millions of people had to move each way. The train behind hers got massacred. Everybody. Yeah. And my mum she would have been 12 then.
Wow.
So, they lost everything. They were refugees effectively, as good as, because a partition was put, which took their town on the wrong side of the border. So, there's a million things going on in the world, but nobody seemed, and this is going back, 70, 80 years now. Nobody then, nobody now wants to give that empathy and wants to understand somebody else's story very much. They just want to vilify them, as they did back then, as they do now, as they will next year and the year after. It doesn't matter where people are from. It's like a divide and rule. We'll label you something. We'll hate all ginger people next. We'll hate all. You know what I mean? It's people in a certain car or a certain way.
Yeah.
What's
you're
it gonna
right.
be?
It becomes a word. So you hear the word immigrant, and there's sometimes a narrative put to that. So, like you say. So I don't for one second think you'd get an easy life if you came over here anyway. I don't think there is an easy life. And you try and have empathy. I think it's an old school generation thing as well. Like when I was young, that was the saying, like, Polish, they only come over here so they can earn more money and go back home. It's just, those little narratives, and they stick with you as a child, don't they? And that's how you start to view the world as an adult. So you kind of have to almost unlearn what you've learned from the olden days and kind of relearn. But that's where going into the hospitals and getting hands-on with the charity, it's the fastest way to open your eyes to what's really going on. So because if you see an immigrant child dying on the bed, you don't give a fuck where they've come from. You just feel empathy and compassion. Like it's real. They're a human. And you can relate to that. I think when you're sat back in your home reading the paper, there's a big disconnect. So I think to get out there and get involved.
Because you've seen that with your own eyes, not through the paper's opinion of what you should see.
Yeah, and it's real when you see it. It's not real when you read about it, I don't think, anyway. It's you shut the paper and it's over. Yeah. Whereas you can't do that when you're in it. So I think getting your hands dirty and getting involved and doing things is really good for you. And I think it makes better people. Yeah. It certainly made me more compassionate and empathetic, man.
Actually, how we got involved with Molly Ollies was because when the Ukraine thing happened, my office had a whip round and then ordered a load of stuff that they had a list of things they wanted to send over. And it was things like battery chargers, nappies. Right. There were certain things they were short of, you know what I mean? Then they ordered it all, and I went and picked it up and I dropped it down to where they were collecting at the Polish centre. So, they were complaining about Poles, but they dug in there, didn't they? Yep. And then we got involved with loading up the lorries and spent a couple of days down there. And I don't know if you've met him. There's a guy who's got a delivery company who's got the pink Molly Ollies van that drives around. I haven't, no. I've forgotten his name now. Really good guy. I'll come into my mind in a minute. I got talking to him because he and I were dropping stuff off, picking stuff up. And he introduced me to the Molly's ladies. And that's how we got involved, and then you got involved and somebody else will get involved and it will go on. And we've done a grant for them through our charity.
Okay.
And it goes on and it goes on. So there's a question then. Why are Ukrainian immigrants who needed to get out because of a war treated differently from others?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's putting it out there.
Well, I know why. It's because of what we're shown and what we're told.
Yeah, good
so
point.
there are wars going on all over the place
Yeah.
that we just don't know about, right? So you're right. It's but empathy is a strange one because, like the polars in politics, like for some people they have so little empathy. But there's a great book on this actually, how you can swing too far on the empathetic side. So, like for example, if it's a friend or a family member or a society, you can be so empathetic that nothing changes. So the people,
How do you mean?
So the people on benefits that you suggest might want to contribute to the community, almost sometimes too much empathy is but it's hard, it's difficult. They've got like caring doesn't change the situation. So I could sit here and care about the Ukrainian people all day long, at the cost of my own drain to my own energy, but do absolutely zero. So therefore nothing has actually changed. So the argument there for me, empathy, too much empathy is not going to be a good thing.
Yeah.
Closer to home, I can get involved in the charity work and have empathy, but actually do something about it.
Yeah, on a practical level.
On a practical level. And it's a weird thing. Like I say, everything's quite paradoxical about that. So it will get me so far in life, empathy, but it has to be, I think, if you're wanting to create change, it has to be something you can attach to. Otherwise, where do you put all your attention on suffering? It goes everywhere because there's so much suffering in the world. So if you can maybe make the suffering a little less, that's where you should put your empathy.
Yeah, where you can impact. And this goes back to what we said earlier, which is, what can you actually, like we were talking about conspiracy theories and worrying about X, Y, Z, what can you actually impact day to day? What can you do to make the world a slightly better place? And
this is hard for caring people because there's so much going on in the world that it feels almost like horrific to say, well, I'm not going to pay attention.
You could just overload.
Of course you could.
Yeah,
of course you could.
Go mad. Yeah.
So to say I'm not going to check what's going on in Ukraine feels quite cold, but it's like, but nothing's changed because of it.
Have you noticed one thing? And they said this would happen, that when it began, that war, and it's still going on more or less the same as it when it began, isn't it? Give or take.
I don't know.
Yeah. They said that would come. It was on the news every moment of every day, and now it's not. But it's still about give or take the same. It's still,
Well, that's
going
the
on.
worry. It will become normal, like some of the other wars have. Like I didn't know there was fighting going on in Sudan until the other day.
No.
There's all sorts
Yemen,
of
Sudan,
yeah,
Israel, Palestine,
Syria.
and all that.
That's crazy.
It's none of it's good.
No, and that you're right. It will start to quieten down, but we've got such a short attention spans that they will fill that gap with something else soon. They'll have to. The news needs some form of focus and narrative to give us. So that something else will take its place soon. I don't know what that will be. Which is terrifying, but there's all sorts of bad things that could happen at the minute. But the newspapers are good at focusing on the bad things, of course. And we've got to be careful we don't kind of build the world up to become a real cynical place and everyone becomes bitter and resentful, because then you've got a bunch of horrible individuals running around the place.
Yeah, but is this where we've got to go back and try and just do our little bit, everybody, to instill a few decent values and principles and ideas?
It's the only way I can see out of it. It's just such a long-term game, and trying to, like we said about saving today for 20 years, to convince people to do that is difficult. To convince somebody to get their own shit in order so that it helps generation number 3 is also really difficult.
Yeah.
People can't always join the dots of like what you do now has a direct impact to everybody that you come into contact with, and your family and everybody. It's insane. Like, I don't think we can even comprehend like our actions, what impact it will have, because you've got how many staff?
9 of us in
Cool.
all. Yeah.
So if you go in today and you're not your best self or you're horrible, I guarantee you'll impact all 9 people. They'll go home, probably impact all of their family. They reckon there's a web of about like what you do can touch 1 million people.
Wow.
Knock-on effect, yeah.
Yeah.
And you know 1 million people, by the way, apparently, according to this web. So
You
know
really?
someone, you know someone who knows someone who knows someone
Yeah.
who knows someone who knows someone.
Yeah.
And then it eventually kind of ends. But yeah, that's what I mean. You can impact and affect up to 1 million people.
Ripples.
Yeah, and we know this to be true because, like I say, there'll be things like in our own upbringings that have affected and shaped and molded who we are, right? The good and the bad. So I can only think that we have to take some self-responsibility. However, that's such an unattractive way to change the world. So we're not just, it's not a money throwing thing. It's not a putting plasters on things. This is saying, no, as individuals, we've got to do the work on ourselves because we're very flawed. But unless you know you're flawed, you can't have empathy and compassion for people that are flawed too. So one of the good things that I'm good at in the Better Man is if someone's fucked up or made some shitty decisions or can show signs of not being a very nice person, I don't put them down because of it, because I can see myself in that. And because I can see myself in it, I know that I've got to work on it. And then I can stop focusing on them, I can work on myself, so I become a better human. So now I can go into these charities and do good work because I'm a half-decent person. So that's a long-winded way around it. But it all starts with you taking self-responsibility and self-discipline. Again, people hate that fucking word, discipline. but it makes the world a better place. Imagine if everyone was ill-disciplined.
Oh, you'd have anarchy, wouldn't you?
Which is what's happening. People are becoming so ill-disciplined to control their emotions, for example, that everyone's screaming off the top of their lungs how they feel, and it's causing carnage. Because you can be so reactive on social media now. You can see someone and just go, "Fuck you," type it, boom.
Keyboard warrior stuff.
Yeah, no consequence.
No, there isn't. Yeah, there's no comeback.
So you can say whatever the hell you want, and I don't think that's a good thing. You know.
Then you look at what's going on in places like America and guns and stuff like that, and schools. They were saying how many a mass shooting is 4 or more people dead, I think, and they were saying how many there've been this year.
How many has there been?
Oh, I don't know. It was massive. It was how many a week. It wasn't like how many there've been, and it was just like a big old number. And you're just like, and then half of them are in schools.
The gun thing's a weird one.
They defend that right.
They do.
Vehemently.
I think there's a few concerns in America. They want their guns because I think they feel like they'd be even more powerless to the government right now if they didn't have those guns, right?
Right.
But here's a good argument, and I felt this and experienced this in America because people have got guns. Like you watch your tongue a bit more, you're a bit more respectful, and so road rage, right? In America, you got to be careful of who you're getting out your car to before you give the V signs and stuff. The police there, for example, they've got guns.
Yeah, true.
Like you're more. I'm more fearful / respectful, probably when I'm in America than I am here. But because it's the threat of violence that often keeps people under control. So if me and you verbally start arguing now, we will stop at a certain point because we will know it could get physical. We probably don't want it to get physical.
True.
Because I'll know that you could punch me and you'll know that I could punch you. So because of that threat, it's the thing that controls our tongue a bit.
Yeah.
If there was no threat of violence from you, or I was towering over you and you were petrified and I wasn't, you would be the one watching your tongue and I wouldn't. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes the threat of that can be the thing that can control the situation.
So you're thinking...
I'm not pro-gun, by the way.
That's the way they actually control themselves.
I think
and keep a lid on it.
Yeah, I think the threat, again, like any pendulum, like you go to a dictatorship country and the threat is so great that you are terrified. What I mean is over here, probably, it's kind of like gone the opposite way where there's not enough consequence for behaviour that isn't true or good to society. Like you can get away with quite a lot here.
Or more than there?
What, more than America?
Yeah.
Maybe we're the same. It's just they have guns, we have knives.
Yeah.
But what I mean is, it's like too much freedom, too much of a liberal society. It sounds amazing. We want everyone to be free and liberal, But people do like some rules and some. So if you take a sport, God's figure, why do you love football, man? Football's a great sport, right? But there's rules.
Yeah, there are, absolutely.
11 aside.
Yeah.
Yeah, 45 minutes each way. The ball can't go outside this white, so we've got to pop the ball in the net. And it's the rules that make the game so great.
Yeah.
And it's what keeps it strong. And I think sometimes we lack those rules in life and in our own life that keep us in order and keep things balanced.
Okay. Going back to America then for a sec, though. But when a 10-year-old's at school learning maths and some nutter runs in, yeah, that's got nothing to do with rules and respect, has it?
No, but
because the guy who ran in knew he's going to get shot by the police in the end.
Sure, yeah, for
so
sure.
He don't care.
No, but again, it's another example of just like a bitter and resentful and fucked up person, right? Like, and we don't want to create people like that.
No,
but we have that here.
But they don't go around and kill 10 kids.
No, the difference is, and with a gun, you can pop
take
bullets
a lot
out.
of people
yeah, but it's still a human. It's the way the human is handling the weapon, right? And by the way, I want to confirm, like, I wouldn't want guns here, for example.
No.
But what I mean is, I don't think you solve problems by saying, right, we're making guns illegal in America. You might stop some shootings, which you could argue is a fucking valid reason to.
That would do. Shooting 10-year-olds would do.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Whatever problem you cause. Okay, people go and beat each other up a little bit more. Well, if a bunch of rednecks go and beat each other up a bit more, then, they get a few broken noses.
No. I know. I just don't think much changes. I think that gets replaced with something else.
But there's something else. Will it necessarily be worse? I don't know if it would be. If it could be.
I don't know. I think statisticians have a look at like how many people are killed in gun crime versus like knife crime versus suicide versus alcoholism and stuff like that. So yeah, I know.
Alcoholism you're doing to yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I get.
I know it's not quite that simple, but
No.
But you're not doing it to the 10-year-old in the classroom learning maths.
Yeah, I know. But it does go back to like we're raising children capable of doing such horrific things. So just take the gun out of the equation for a minute, because I know that's the thing.
Yeah,
it's still. I think there's still an underlying like, what on earth was a kid doing with that gun, and what on earth was in their heads to make that happen?
Oh, playing Call of Duty all day long or whatever. Yeah.
Well, you've got to have a pretty horrific. But like, if you want to talk about true empathy and compassion, like, can you show any for the murderer?
Oh wow.
The 15-year-old. That might have been fucking raped, abused, had horrific things by his parents done to him. So, do you know what I mean? Can you develop that level of compassion for someone that's just shot 10 kids? Like, that's a next level question, right?
That's diverting the subject. The first question was.
Sorry.
That's a whole other. Like we said earlier on, none of these things are simple answers.
No, I haven't got answers.
They all have levels and levels, but
this is what's good, conversation.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So I don't know the answers either. Yeah. But no idea.
What was I going to say? Their argument in America always. Well, I know it was a Trump thing who said it was almost like, well, in that case, just arm more people, arm the teachers as well.
I know that.
Arm the other students.
Arm the teachers.
Yeah, that's.
So now, to be a teacher, you've got to be a frigging teacher and like an assassin. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
That's crazy.
But that's where they go, isn't it? Armed guards and metal detectors is a normal thing, apparently.
Yeah, it does bring into question where does it end? Yeah.
So if you take them all out of this, and I know their thing is, well, if the good people haven't got guns, the bad people will still have guns. Therefore, bad things will still happen. But that's what happens here a little bit, isn't it? Very rarely, thankfully, here in the UK. But
it's not solving a problem by giving teachers guns, is it?
No, it's not. But that's their escalation, isn't it? And then they get a bigger gun and a bigger gun and an automatic and an AK and
they have rocket launchers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But that's the thing. I mean, about like solving problems at the deep root. Like that's like medication or symptoms, and we fix the symptoms. We'll give teachers. It's like that's never going to solve the problem. So, but again, that's. As an adult, it amazes me that people can't see that like giving teachers the guns is not good. Like, we're talking about high level, intelligent people running the country that think the answer is to give teachers guns to stop gun crime.
Exactly.
I'm like, are you frigging stupid?
Yeah. It's just escalation, isn't it?
Yeah, but we know that. We can see it's escalation. So why can't some of the brainiest, smartest people in the world see it and think,
the argument is because the gun industry is there so powerful and makes so much money and donates so much money, and this is back to your corruption thing right at the beginning that we began with, wasn't it? Over here.
Yeah.
And if you analyse that in probably any country or any region or any zone, we'll find the same, or any business or any, you know what I mean? There's so many places where you can see things are just not done as they should be. There's many levels of that.
There is. Mate, we've been all over the place on this conversation.
Hasn't been as positive as it could have been.
You're making me feel bad now.
It's quite dark.
Welcome to the Better Man podcast.
Yeah.
No, do you know what, though?
Yeah.
No, this is a good point. We spoke about this the other day on a podcast. Some of the most successful podcasts, they've been labelled like, some of them, they're predictable and a little bit soulless sometimes, because you kind of always know they're going to have a nice ending. And I know you're a nice, happy, positive guy.
Finish. Yeah,
but sometimes, life is quite difficult. So I like to talk about, people can relate to difficulties and pain, and there's nothing we've said today that isn't real or maybe a concern to somebody listening. So I think it should be discussed.
Yeah,
I think some of the best conversations aren't always like positive.
No.
Yeah. The good news is, though, what's come out of this conversation is that, I don't know if you've heard this, but I've heard, like, as an individual, you've got to kind of step up and take some responsibility. So you can change things, and you can kind of change what your world is by your perspective and where you focus your energies. So you can improve things.
Do you a little bit of good.
Yeah, starting with what goes on in your own head, because that's your world. So, no, I think there's an overriding positive step that people can take. But you do have to be open and aware that life is difficult and life is hard. Therefore, you're going to have to try and put a lot of effort in. Because if you don't, it can be worse than it needs to be.
Absolutely. That is the thing. You've got to be strong. You've got to, have convictions. But there's some people who've got convictions, as we talked about, that aren't the nicest convictions that are going to help others. So you've got to have, strong ethical convictions.
Sure.
Yeah. For yourself, for your family, for others, for doing the right thing. Because there's a lot of people who have very strong convictions that weren't helpful to others. And we got to try and help influence that, in our own little way, whether it's with our kids, whether it's with our friends, whether it's with anyone we chat with. And respect that people see things differently, but try and help out either way. Do our little bit to make things better. Yeah. But there's so much stuff I'd sort of thought that I would talk about.
This always happens.
Yeah, that I would perhaps touch upon. And but it is that, I suppose the thing to take from it is that we can all do our bit to make things better. Try and put in more than we take out. We never told your Starbucks coffee story, which I think is lovely. I don't know if you've told it on here in the past.
I haven't. I try. I don't think I have.
Got to end on this, because at least we end on a big up then. I think this is brilliant what you do.
Yeah. And by the way, I'll share it. Yeah, because someone told me that some of the best charity is anonymous. So, for example, when I do this in Starbucks, the people don't know that it's me that's done it. So it's a simple pass it on thing that we were speaking about. So I will go into Starbucks and I will buy a £10 voucher and say, look, the next person that you feel might be cheered up or looks like they could do with a free coffee and a cake, or someone who comes in, whatever, a little old lady comes in, I'm like, just buy them whatever the hell they want, and don't tell them it's me, because I'll go and sit and do my work or anything. And yeah, and that's what I do, and I do that quite a lot. And I get selfishly a kick out of it because I get to see these people smile. And I know that the impact of what these little Ds can have on someone's day. To us, it might be a free coffee. To them, it might be the centre of their fucking day. Might have cheered them up. They might be having a shit time. It just kind of shows you that there's goodness going on in the world. I think when we look at goals and ambitions, one, we focus on ourselves, and two, we think of these massive things that we can do to change the world. I'm like, you kind of can change someone's world by buying them a coffee, by holding the door open for someone, by saying you look good today, whatever it is. And I'm like, it's that kind of nice-natured human behaviour that seems to be getting left behind, or maybe not left behind, we just don't hear about it anymore, and it goes on. One of the great things about going into hospital is like, finally, I'm surrounded by good, caring people. I forgot they existed. I was like, I needed to see this because I'm thinking everything's conspiratorial, everything's dark, people are horrible, and that's not true. People are nice. You've just got to get out there and be around them. So that's one of my things that I do. I've also joined Prep for 25 quid a month. You get 5 drinks a day. So now the big issue guys are getting frigging hot chocolates and all sorts. And I think at first they were like, oh, this is great. Now they're like, oh God, I can't drink another hot chocolate.
So you're just giving them the vouchers?
Yeah, I thought for 25 quid a month.
Yeah.
So I go and work there, so I'll have a cup of tea.
Yeah.
But there's often people, what you call it when they play instruments for music?
Busking.
So I'll buy them a cup of tea.
Good.
There's a lot of homeless people in Stratford now. I don't know where it's all stem from. I'll get them a hot drink. Yeah. There's just something that makes you feel good about serving. You know, serving people that you may consider not as fortunate as you.
Yeah, my kids worked for a while because we did stuff with it's called Leamington Winter Shelter. It's like a homeless shelter.
Yeah,
Leamington.
Okay. Yeah.
And we did some stuff with them, and then my kids, they were probably still 15, the twins, maybe 16. They couldn't be there when the residents came because they were under 18 and they weren't allowed to be there then. But they would go in before they came, and they would do prep. You know, so my lad would be moving stuff around, throwing stuff about, tidying stuff up. And my daughter always ended up in the kitchen, and she said she'd always end up in there with a bunch of old grannies who were prepping food, and she loved it. She says, I learnt a different way to cut a different vegetable, what I mean? And she loved the skills she got from it, and interacting with the people who were there. And it's like you said, it's doing a bit of good. And they just used to go for an hour or two once or twice a week. And then the other thing we used to do is we used to go Morrison's and Tesco's used to donate food for it. Sure. So we'd go the night before, pick up all the stuff, store it, and drop it down the next day for them. And it was just, it's about what you said. There was nothing in it for them other than knowing they were doing a bit of good and teaching them some good morals and principles and caring for others. Just like you do with your coffees. Yeah. And you hope you're paying it forwards, and then that person who has benefited from you will pay it forwards to someone else, who'll pay it forwards to someone else, and
you do see that
ripple
happen.
Effects. A million people, ripple effect.
Yeah, you do see that happen. I remember a girl at Costa who was working behind was coming over to me, and she was like, I just thought I wanted to give you this free cake. The cake was covered in nuts, so I couldn't eat it. I didn't tell her that. But then I passed it on to this woman who was selling the big issue. So I gave her the cake and she was happy. And then I saw her do something really nice for someone else. And I could just see the web of goodness being thrown around.
It does work.
So, But one, just finally, I've always suffered with this weird kind of depressive kind of mindset. But that evaporates when I'm doing things like that. So when I'm in the hospitals, or I'm doing things like the charitable gestures, it all evaporates. So it's kind of there's answers there, isn't there? There's It's just being brave enough then to go and dedicate more of your life to do that.
Yes, making the space to do it.
Yeah, because it might go against the whole image you've built up of yourself over 30 years, like business owner.
Doesn't go against it, surely.
No, when I say go against it, I mean sometimes we have illusions of how life should be. And how we think life's going to be. So I'm always going to be a business owner. But I don't know that's true, man. I actually might be the kind of guy that is willing to go and work in the frigging soup kitchen for 8 hours a day. But to do that takes a huge amount of courage. Imagine telling people that. What do you do now, Alex? I work in a soup kitchen. Yeah, I get. But you know what I'm saying?
Is anyone going to...
No, I don't care. Yeah, I mean, it's internal conflict. Because in my head, I should have always been this. And that might have just been a story that I've told myself every day that might not be true for 30 years. And it's having the courage to listen to what's going on in your heart and soul and going, but what I really love doing is helping people that don't have much.
So that could be your business instead. You could own the soup kitchen.
Yeah.
And then you're still a business owner.
You can link it in,
You can dress it up. You can make it work. You could have two.
You're right. See, there's an entrepreneur. You're a real entrepreneur thinking right there. Last question, if I may. Traditional. But by the way, you've been great today.
Thank you.
You've... one of the things I love about you is you mentioned this earlier. When you work, you work. When you play, you play. When you talk, you talk. Like you're good at whatever you decide to do. And it's one of the things I really respect about you. You've got this legit business, a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, but you have fun. And you don't see many business owners that run a business at a high level that still have fun and go and play. And you're really, really good at that.
Thank you.
What do you need to work on now in order to become a better man? You probably would have heard this question at the end. So you're prepped. You'll be prepped.
I knew it was coming.
Yeah, you've got the page open. Right, cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things that I loved that was said at one of your meetings was to have and this ties up with today, to have a purpose, to keep working on your purpose. And that's beautiful. I love that phrase. I don't know who said it at one of your meetings. I don't know if you did or whether
I'll take credit.
You take it. You take that
one.
It
weren't me, but I'm going to take credit.
Take that one. I did like that. To continue to do the basics. I'm really keen on the basics. So I had one which was read. Yeah. Read, exercise and dry day.
Yeah.
Yeah. At least 4 days a week, read and exercise. And I stack them up by listening to your podcasts or watching Motiversity while I'm in the gym.
Yeah, that's good, isn't it?
Which is all good. But now I've got 80 of your podcasts to listen to, so that's cool. Yeah. Enjoying what we have. I'm not chasing stuff really that's materialistic. I'm quite happy just to enjoy experiences. This is an experience, isn't it?
Sure.
This is like it's cool. It's cool having the bandwidth to do things like this. Or just go for a walk, or go somewhere, do something different. And then the only work one I've got is to focus on upgrading and upskilling my team to make myself effectively redundant. Yeah, so that I'm able to retire when I decide to push the button. So we're lucky enough that because we haven't chased and spent all our money, we just about could retire now, but I want to have everything in place, so I'm succession planning my business. I'm never going to sell it. It's a plan, touch wood, that the apprentices we've taken on, there's 5 of them, will be the guys to take over the business and to carry on looking after our clients into the future. And so what my job now is to keep upgrading them over the next couple of years to have them ready to do so.
Cool. Then you'll be able to give more of your time to another cause, hobby, adventure, whatever it so be.
Indeed.
That'll be an interesting time for you when you do have some more free time.
Yeah.
So I know how much you've given to your business. It's
Thank you.
one of the first things I noticed about, I can't remember when I met you now, probably 12 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, your energy was through the roof.
Thank you.
Whizzing around the place. I thought, fucking hell, this guy's nuts. But yeah, you've really helped me out. And thank you for all your guidance as well. So we'll give it a little shout. What's the business called?
Leamington Financial Services.
Leam.
Yes. Leamington Spa.
Yeah. One of the best, man. Like I say, trust is a big thing for me when it comes to finance. Trust is huge. So you've been awesome.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Thank you very much, dude.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks.
Mate, that was awesome.
Yeah, it was indeed. Pleasure and a privilege.